Yo, welcome to another episode with Ignite the Spark Within podcast. I'm your host, Sebastian Hernandez, and I am here to empower world-class leaders like yourself to create a life on your own terms. On these podcasts, we will be exploring the mysteries of self-mastery, shamanism, mysticism, conscious sexuality, and overcoming depression and anxiety. We'll be interviewing some of my very own tribe members from around the world and share some of our personal stories. We'll be discovering and implementing tools and strategies for living a more fulfilled life. So, join me on this journey of self-discovery and let's ignite that spark within together. Season 3, episode 122, Why We Sabotage Our Own Power. All right, yo. Welcome back to another episode of Ignite the Spark Within. I'm your host, Sebastian, and today our conversation is going to be about something that I'm sure you have asked yourself at some point in time, right? And I would say that most of us have asked this, and that is, why do we sabotage ourselves, right? Like, why? Why do we sabotage ourselves with our own thoughts? Yeah, like why do we choose mental prison over mental freedom? Why do we torture ourselves daily with scenarios that exist nowhere but in our heads? So every Tuesday, I don't know if I've shared this with you, I'm sure I have, we have our integration circle. And that's integration circle is a circle where I combine men and women to have a conversation about what it means to be a healthy man and a healthy woman in today's day and age. And I have to say that yesterday, the circle was probably one of the most powerful integration circles that I've gotten an opportunity to facilitate. Like this was an opportunity for I think it was like 13 of us. 13 of us to courageously, in a very vulnerable space and safe space, examine the very thoughts that keep us playing small in life. Yeah. And here's what we uncovered. We got some pretty like fucking gold. Yeah. And it's some of the stuff that I'm sure would that like really helps us understand the process and the magic of healing and how to make it happen. Yeah. And so here's what we got. So part of it was yesterday was brought up to our attention that 99%, right? And this morning I went and I verified and it's not 99, it's actually 94%. But get this, right? And so they've done this research, right? From Penn State University, and they actually found that 91% of our worry predictions never actually come true. Yeah, that's like 91.4%. And get this, for about 1 in every 4 participants, right, exactly 0 of their worries materialized. Now, like, let's let that land for a moment. Yeah, like, if we think about that, we're literally choosing to live, often most of us, yeah, whenever we're stuck in our chaos and our drama, right? But we're literally choosing to live in a horror movie that our minds are producing, it's directing, and it's making us believe that's true. And yet 90% of it is pure fiction. And here's what's more insane, that how many of you know this? Like, we know this and we keep doing it anyway. We know that most of our fears won't manifest, yet we keep feeding them. We know our thoughts create our reality, yet we let them run wild like untrained animals. So today, I want to have a conversation with you about exploring this maybe a little bit deeper, right? Like, what if we examine the architecture of self-sabotage? And let's look into where these thoughts actually come from, like why they feel so real. And I would say even more importantly, how to reclaim our mental sovereignty. Yeah. So this is it, you guys. Like, this is part of the work. This is the work. This is the real, the raw, the sometimes uncomfortable work that must be done to really become masters of our own mind instead of its slave. Yeah? Because if we don't have the tools or awareness to do the work of our limiting beliefs, of our chaos, of our darkness, of the things that take our piece away get us out of our center, then we'll stay stuck there. So let's start with talking about this 91% statistic. Yeah. Because again, this isn't just a number, right? Like when we really think about like how 90% of the things that we are concerned about aren't actually real or they're not going to happen. And the way it happened was, or what they did in this research was that they had these researchers follow people that were dealing with like anxiety disorder, right? And they were following them for a couple of weeks, right? And every time that these folks recorded their worries, right, in real time, they were tracked. And what they actually found was that 91.4% of the worries these people were having never came true. And that 25% of the participants, right, zero of their worries materialized, right? And so think about how much time they spent torturing themselves. And this goes for all of us, right? When we're dealing with these anxieties, right? And again, anxiety is things from the future. We're anticipating something that may happen in the future. And yet though it's not, right? Now, I want you to imagine something with me, yeah? Like, I want you to think about this. Like, picture yourself carrying around a book bag, yeah? Now, that book bag is filled with rocks. And consider that every worry, every catastrophic thought, every what-if scenario, well, that's just another rock in your bag, right? And so now think about how much weight is on your bag. And you're walking through life bent over, exhausted, struggling with this weight. Your shoulders are probably aching. Your bag is probably tight. You know that you're moving way slower than you could. And by default, you're going to miss opportunities because you can't move quickly enough, right? And you're going to avoid certain paths because in the back of your mind, it's like, I got too much weight right now. And what the research shows us is that actually 90% of those rocks, they're not even real. They're phantom rocks that our mind convinced us to carry. Now, think about this. Think about how unnecessarily difficult we've been making our life by carrying 91% more weight than was actually necessary. And how much smoother would our life, would our journey be without all of that fucking weight? How much flexible could we be? How much more agile could we be? How much more responsive, more alive? Now, imagine that you actually take this book bag off, yeah? And imagine that you're standing up straight for the first time in years. And imagine being able to run toward those opportunities instead of crawling away from those imaginary threats. Like, imagine having the energy you've been burning on fictitious, disastrous, available for actual creation, right? Like how much of our energy is just wasted on fictional disasters instead of actually using it for creating, for building the life that we want, for being present with the people that we love. And this is what we're doing to ourselves, you guys. Like we're choosing to live life on expert difficult mode when we could be flowing with grace and ease. Like we're voluntary prisoners in our own mental jail. And 91% of the bars are actually made up of nothing but air. So you guys remember how last week, actually, no, before I go into that, right? Let me share what happened in our integration circle that can illustrate this even better, I would say. So one of the participants, she was describing how on their drive back from her meditation class, right? She's in this elevated state. She's feeling peaceful. She's connected. She's grounded. And then out of nowhere, bam, this like intrusive thought hits her like a freight train. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Instead of getting swept away by the thought, instead of diving headfirst into the mental horror movie, she did something revolutionary. She did something different. She became the observer. And she looked at her mind and said, okay, well, what are you doing? Like, why are you bringing this terrible thing that isn't even happening into this moment? And you know what happened? The thought actually erased. Like it went quiet Because the moment you step out of unconscious thinking and into conscious observation, things shift, right? And like this brings us to the most important question you can probably ask yourself in this context, and is, do you ever consider what you're thinking? Like, do you ever think about what you think about, or are you unconsciously living your thoughts, right? Like I know one of my mentors, Mr. Harry Noonan, right? So shout out to Mr. Harry Noonan out in San Diego, California, right? And so he would always catch me by surprise and ask me, are you thinking about what you think about? Right? Like, meaning, are you aware of what you're thinking? Right? You see, most people, and I mean that by like vast majority of humanity, are like, oh, we're on this complete autopilot, and we let our thoughts think through us. Yeah? Like our minds run the show while we're the ones just going along for the ride, getting tossed around by every mental wave. But what if there's another way? Like there's the path of the observer. Yeah. And the observer is the part of us that can step back and watch the mind in action. It's the part that can say, oh, that's an interesting thought. Look at that. Where did that come from? Like, is this thought serving me right now? Right? Like the experiencer, on the other hand, becomes the thought. When the thought says, you're not good enough, the experiencer says, oh, okay, I guess I believe it. And I feel it. And now I live it. When the thought says something terrible is going to happen, the experiencer starts planning for disaster, right? Now, here's what I want you to understand, that you're not your thoughts. You're the one who chooses which thoughts to feed and which thoughts to starve. But unless we become aware of that, we do this on autopilot. Right? And so in our circle, someone brought up how we're often, and I guess this brings a lot of validity to it, right? Because in our circle yesterday, one of the persons brought up how when we're stressed, yes, when we're in chaos, when when our nervous system is activated, well, that's usually when we become the most unconscious. And that's when the thoughts really take over completely. But when we're grounded, when we've taken the time to meditate, when we've done our breath work, when we've been able to center ourselves, that's when we can catch these thoughts in real time. And that's when we can interrupt them. Yeah. And so how is our state? Yes. Excuse me. That's going to play a big role. What's our state of mind? Now, think about it this way, right? Our minds, it's like an untrained dog. Right? It's like an untrained dog. Like if we never teach it to sit, if we never like train it when it's called, it's just going to run wild through our life, like chasing every squirrel or worry it sees. But when we train our mind, when we train our dog being our mind, when we become, right, like the conscious owner instead of the confused bystander, suddenly we have choice. Now, here's a practical way I invite you to take on this week, right? Like when you notice yourself spiraling into like this worry, when you catch yourself in that 91% of this fictional horror story that I've just created in my mind, I invite you to ask yourself these simple questions. And one, what are you doing right now? What are you doing right now? Just that. Like, what are you doing? Watch what happens. Watch how that simple act of conscious questioning interrupts the unconscious pattern. And you're literally like stepping out of the movie and into the director's chair. Because here's the truth. You guys, every time you choose consciousness over unconsciousness, every time you choose observer over victim, every time you do that, you're actually reclaiming that mental sovereignty. Like you're remembering that you're the creator of that internal experience. And so I want you to keep track of your worries for just 3 days, right? Like just the next 3 days, right? Whenever you listen to this, they're moving forward, track 3 days, they're moving forward. And when you notice yourself worrying, write that down and be specific. And then at the end of each day, ask yourself, all right, how much of my mental energy today was spent on that 90% that will never happen? Don't judge it. Just observe it, because that is the awareness, right? Awareness is always the first step towards transformation, towards healing, towards a change. We got to become aware, right? But now, where do these ideas, these sabotaging thoughts come from, right? Like, why does our mind default to catastrophe? Why do we actually assume the worst when there's no evidence of it? And the answer that we came up with yesterday is programming. It starts the moment you take your first breath. The moment you come into this planet, you are now starting to become programmed. And yesterday in our integration circle, someone shared this powerful metaphor, and I thought it was really, really well thought out. And she said, or they said, that most of our anxiety, most of our self-sabotage, it actually comes from what they call splinters, like these tiny wounds from childhood that we never properly healed, right? Like these aren't necessarily like dramatic traumas. Sometimes it's as simple as like your father worked 2 jobs and never being emotionally present. Or sometimes it's your mother saying, hey, you know what? Money doesn't grow on trees. And so every time you asked for something, like that was her response. Sometimes it's the teacher who made you feel stupid for asking a question. And here's what happens. That 6-year-old, that 8-year-old, that 10-year-old version of you, it didn't have the cognitive capacity to process the experience properly. So you know what happened? It developed, your mind developed, or I guess, so your developing mind, yes, creates this story, this belief, and that's where the program becomes recorded to make sense of what happened. And there, all of a sudden, we hear things like, I'm not worthy of attention, or money is scarce and dangerous, or I'm not smart enough, or I have to be perfect to be loved. And yet, here's the kicker, you guys. That program keeps running in the back of our adult life, 30, 40, 50 years later, right? Like one of the most profound shares in our circles came from someone who actually thought they had pretty good childhood, right? They're saying like, you know what? My parents always told me I was intelligent. My teachers praised me. I had good grades. So where does my insecurity come from? But as a group, we started to dig deeper. She then realized that something, I guess what she realized was that the pressure to always be that smart one, that was what was created in her own prison. Because every time they faced a challenge, that little kid inside would panic. What if I'm not as smart as everyone thinks? What if I disappoint them? What if I'm exposed as a fraud? Right? And the very thing that was meant to empower them became the source of their self-sabotage. And this is how programming works. Sometimes it's not obvious. Like the wounds sometimes are completely oblivious. Like, what? That's my wound? Yes, that's your golden cage. It's the golden cage we were placed in by expectations, the roles we were forced to play, the parts of ourselves we had to suppress to get love, attention, or approval. Now, this is one of the one of the members of the circle. She shared this powerful tool for reprogramming, right? And I'm sure you've heard of it before. And it's the 21-day practice, right? So your subconscious mind doesn't know, right, the difference between what's real and what you can consistently tell it's real. And it doesn't fact check it. It just doesn't argue. It just records and plays back. So if you've been running the program of I'm not enough for 20 years, I can believe, I'm sure you would agree with me, that your subconscious has 20 years of evidence for that belief. But here's what's incredible, that you can actually start overwriting that programming right now. And to do that with 21 days, right? And it's got to be 21 days consecutive, right? Where you're going to feed your subconscious this new program. So let's say you want to shift from scarcity to abundance. All right, well, every morning you look in the mirror and say with conviction, I am abundant. Opportunities flow to me easily. I am worthy of wealth and success. Like, we know all of this, right? And here's what's going to happen. Your old programming is going to fight back. And it's going to fight really hard. And that little voice is going to say, hey, are you kidding me? Like, look at your bank account. You're delusional. But that's the key. That resistance is actually proof that the reprogramming is working. It means that you're hitting that soft spot. It means the old programming is losing its grip. But now let me be clear about something crucial. Yes. And I got to really bring this up because affirmations alone is not enough. Yes. You can't just think your way into a new reality. The real magic happens when you start actually taking the steps, taking actions that align with the new programming, right? Like if you're affirming abundance, well, then you need to start acting abundant. Maybe that means investing in yourself, taking that course, hiring that coach, buying those higher quality tools. Maybe it means saying no to opportunities that feel small and scarce. Maybe it means having conversations about money from confidence instead of desperation. You see, your subconscious learns through the experience, not just the words. So every time you act from your new program instead of your old one, now you're anchoring it in. Now you're creating evidence. Now you're showing your nervous system, this is who I am now. And this is how I'm going to start moving through the world now, moving forward. And the affirmation plants the seed, but the action is what waters it. And when you repeat the experience, well, the repeated experience starts to grow into an unshakable knowing. Yeah. And so in our circle, we also talked about something I like to call el despertar, right? Like the awakening, right? And it's that moment when you finally ask the most revolutionary question of all. Who am I? Like, who the fuck am I beyond what I was told I am or I'm supposed to be? Right? Because most people never ask this question. They live their entire lives inside of other people's definitions of who they should be, what they should want, and how they should behave. Our parents' fears, well, they become our fears. Our teachers' limitations, yeah, they become our limitations. Society's, that's just how it is, becomes our reality. But that awakening, that despertar, is when you realize I don't have to accept any programming that doesn't serve my highest good. Like, you can look at the belief that you're not smart enough and say, whose voice is this really? Like, when did I first learn this? Does this serve me now? You see, you can now examine the fear of not having enough money and trace it back to watching your parents fight about bills or hearing your grandmother talk about like how hard it was in her time. And you can begin to recognize that the part of you that's always trying to prove yourself is actually just a scared little kid who just wanted to be seen and loved. Now, this isn't about denying our past or pretending that our childhood didn't affect us. This is about recognizing that or that we now have a choice. Yes? That we now have a choice that we can choose how we relate to our past. And that wound isn't what happened to us. The wound is the story we keep telling ourselves about what happened to us. Yes? So someone in our circle shared how they realized that their father wasn't absent because they weren't worthy of love. Their father was absent because he was doing his best with the tools he had and probably repeating patterns from their own childhood. Yes? And there's the thing, identical circumstances, but there was a different story. A completely transformed emotional experience. And this is the power of conscious reprogramming, when we get to choose which story serves us and which story really serves our evolution and which story keeps us stuck. Yeah? So I want us to identify one limiting belief that's been running our life this week. Yeah? Just one. Maybe it's I'm not good enough. Maybe it's I can't trust people. Maybe it's I don't deserve happiness. And now ask yourself, when did I first learn this? Like, whose voice is this really? Does this belief serve my highest good? Write down a new program. Like, what's the opposite of that limiting belief? And for the next 21 days, feed your subconscious this new truth and stay convicted and say it with conviction. Feel it in your body. Act as if it's already true. And acting means taking action as if. Because here's what I know for certain. The stories you tell yourself, they're going to become the life you live. Now, here's a question for you. Now, once you understand the programming and how do we actually change it in real time? Like, how do we shift our perspective when life throws us curveballs? And how do we interrupt decades, yes, of old patterns in the moment they're happening? And in our integration circle, I posed the question to the group, like, there's one word, yes? And I was telling them, there's one word, when you master it, yes, when you master this specific word, it would allow you to master your reality. Like, when you truly understand this word, you have the capacity to control your feelings, your entire life experience. Like, what word do you think that is? And some of the answers were love, presence, consciousness, self-love, right? Like, each beautiful and each powerful in their own right. But then someone said the word, and it's perspective. And that's when everything started to click into place for everyone in the room, right? And well, actually not at first, because when we talk about perspective, it's also the context in which we see perspective, right? So let me share a story, right? And this really helped. Like, what's the saying go? The last nail on the head of the coffin. You know what I mean, hopefully. Right. If you guys remember last week's episode, I talked about my great uncle, right? And real quick, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who reached out in regards to my uncle. And so he passed away, right? And so when I first, so those that don't know the story, when I first received the news, this was about 2 weeks ago now, he was dying, right? Stage 4 cancer, nothing more the doctors could do. So I was invited to go and spend the afternoon with him. And on my way there, yes, I felt all types of like emotions, sadness, and I guess there was an expectation of how I was supposed to see him. Like I was expecting to see a man that was defeated by his circumstance. But actually, when I walked into the room, I found something completely different. I found him being peaceful, content, even playful. He was watching TV, chatting with the nurses, completely at ease. So I decided to go straight to the heart of it. Like I asked him directly, like, "Yo, Theo, you're about to die. How do you feel about dying? Like, what's your relationship to death?" And his response was kind of surprised me. He's like, "I'm ready. I'm calling it already." You see, what happened next showed me that the true power of conscious choice, right? Because after all that pain, after exhausting every medical option, my uncle made the decision, yes, to pursue what's called the death with dignity, or it's medical aid in dying, yes? And this is a legal option that there's, I guess in the States, there's several states that actually allow this, and there's countries, and Colombia happens to be one, where terminally ill patients who meet very strict criteria can actually receive a prescription for life-ending medication that they self-administer. Yeah, and so the requirements are rigorous, right? Like you must have a terminal diagnosis within 6 months or less to live. Like you must be mentally competent and able to make your own decisions. And you have multiple doctors must evaluate you independently. And they're all waiting periods, right? And ultimately, you must be able to take the medication yourself. Yeah. And it's entirely voluntary, right? And so about 30% of people who get the prescription never actually get to use it. So just having the option brings them peace. Yeah. What struck me the most was how this choice united our entire family, right? Instead of months of watching him suffer, instead of the slow, painful, deteriorating, like dreadful death, we had the gift of conscious closure. Like family members got to experience coming together from around the world, and we had deep conversations with him, and we got to share stories and laugh, and we said everything that needed to be said. And when the time came, he faced death with incredible courage. No fear, no resistance, just peaceful acceptance. Like he showed our entire family that death doesn't have to be something we fight against or fear. It can be faced with dignity, consciousness, and grace. And in that moment, my entire perspective like really shifted. Like now it was like solidified because I had just I had walked in expecting my uncle, right? Expecting his death to be like a really hard loss, as a tragedy, as something to fear and fight against. But sitting with him, I saw death through a completely different lens. Again, it confirmed this idea of graduation, of completion, of a peaceful transition to whatever comes next. Same situation, same facts, completely different emotional experience. Now, here's again what I invite you to understand or to consider is that it's not what happened to you that creates your suffering. It's how you're relating to what happened to you, right? Like this is the most empowering realization that you can have, because it means that you always have choice. You always have sovereignty over your internal experience, no matter what's happening externally. Your father left when you were young. All right, well, consider that's a fact. But the story that you're not worthy of love because he left, that's a perspective. That's an interpretation. That can be changed. Your business failed. Okay, well, that's a fact. But the story that you're a failure because it failed, that's perspective. That's a choice about meaning that can be shifted. You see, someone in our circle shared a beautiful example of this. They realized that they had been viewing their father's emotional absence as evidence of their own unworthiness. But when they shifted their perspective, they saw a man who was probably doing his best with the emotional tools he had, likely repeating the patterns from his own childhood as well. Same father, same childhood. But now instead of carrying resentment and unworthiness, he now gets to carry compassion and understanding. right? Like there was another really powerful experience when we actually got to like really see this and the I guess the experience of perspective, right? Now imagine we draw this number 6 on a piece of paper and place it between us, right? From my side, I see a clear 6. From your side, you see a clear 9. Who's right? Well, we both are. And this is perspective in action. And this is what we got to see last night. Most of our suffering comes from insisting that our view is the only view and our interpretation is the only truth. But what if you can train yourself to walk around the table? What if you could get curious about how the same situation looks from different angles? The magic isn't finding the right perspective. It's simply in recognizing that you have the power to choose which perspective and which perspective serves you the highest good, right? So here's a practice that can change your life, I would say. And anytime you're stuck in suffering, right? Anytime you're trapped in a victim story, anytime you feel powerless, ask yourself this question: how else can I see this? Like, is there another way else to see this? Right? And no, actually, you know what? No, not even is there another way else to see this, because how else can I see this is like is the affirmation that there is a different way, because there's always another lens available, always. And maybe the job rejection isn't evidence that you're not good enough. Maybe it's the universe protecting you from a situation that would have had you stopped your growth. Or maybe that relationship ending isn't proof that you're unlovable. Maybe it's making space for someone who can truly see and appreciate who you are. And maybe that financial struggle isn't a sign that you're destined for lack. Maybe it's teaching you resourcefulness and forcing you to clarify what you really value. I'm not talking about toxic positivity either, right? I'm not saying pretend everything is perfect. I'm talking about conscious meaning making. I'm talking about reclaiming your power to choose how you relate to your circumstances. It's a matter of choice. And so when you master your perspective, everything changes. When you're no longer at the mercy of your automatic interpretations, you become that conscious creator of your emotional experience, because you stop being a victim of your circumstances and you start being a student of your growth. You stop being triggered by other people's pain and you start responding from your center. You stop living in a reaction to life and start living in conscious creation of life. You see, someone shared in our circle how this shift affected their relationship patterns. That instead of seeing their partner's behavior as rejection or criticism, they started seeing it as a person expressing their own pain or fear. Same behavior, different lens, completely different relationship. You see, this is the ultimate freedom, you guys. The recognition that no one and nothing can make you feel anything without your participation. Your perspective is your sovereignty. Your lens is your power. The circumstance of your life, that's the raw material. But your perspective is what determines whether the raw material becomes a sculpture or becomes rubble, whether it becomes a foundation or it becomes a prison. So I want you to pick one situation in your life that consistently triggers you, consistently makes you feel small or powerless or angry, just one. And now grab your journal and write down at least 3 different ways you could view this same situation. The invitation: get creative, get curious, ask yourself, how would my wisest self see this? How would someone who loved me unconditionally interpret this? How might this actually be serving my growth? And look, don't just think about it, write it down. Like, let yourself feel into these different perspectives. Notice how your body responds different to each lens. Because here's what I know for certain, and that is that every time you choose an empowered perspective over an inherited interpretation, you remember who you really are. And now here's the big takeaway I want you to carry for you today, right? And it's that you're not a victim of your thoughts. Yeah? Like, you're not a slave to your programming. You're not at the mercy of your circumstances. You're at the conscious creator, right? Like, you are the conscious creator of your internal experience. You are the master of your perspective. You are the one who decides what everything means. And every time you catch a sabotaging thought and choosing consciousness over unconsciousness, you remember your power. Every time you identify old programming and choose to act from a new possibility, you remember your freedom. Every time you shift your perspective from victim to student, you're powerless to sovereignty, you remember who the fuck you are. And this is the work, tribe. Not that Instagram quote version of a transformation. No, this is the real embodied practice of becoming the master of your own mind, the creator of your own reality, the author of your own story. This is where we return to choice, to consciousness, to the recognition that your perspective is your superpower. So now listen. If what we talked about today hit you in your core at any place at all, right? If you're ready to do some deeper work on perspective and perspective mastery and mental sovereignty, then I invite you to look into the inner circle, right? Because this isn't just for inspiration, it's for integration, right? It's where together as a community, as a tribe, where we do the actual work of becoming the conscious creators of our internal experience, right? Where we get to recognize where our victim mindset gets to be replaced by unconscious programming into conscious programming. Yeah. And if you're more interested into one-on-one coaching, well, then for those that are ready, I would say, to identify with your specific programming and really mastering your perspective and building that unshakable mental sovereignty, then I would say that the container of the Align program is for you, right? And this is where we get to work one-on-one, right? And lastly, it's Clean Planet Day this Saturday, you guys. So remember, the last Saturday of every month, it's Clean Planet Day, meaning that the invitation is to go pick up at least one bag of trash and share your deed on social media. And again, this isn't to brag, but to inspire to take action, to be in movement. Because listen, how we treat the earth mirrors how we treat ourselves. So go ahead and make that service sacred and let your presence ripple, because people notice and people are inspired by people's actions. And sometimes inspired enough to want to do it themselves. And if enough of us can do one small action and inspire others, imagine if just every single human being, right, 8 billion people picked up trash from where it didn't belong and properly disposed of it. How much cleaner would our world be? Right? So keep choosing consciousness. Keep remembering you are the creator of your reality, starting with that perspective that you get to choose. Yes? And until next time, keep igniting that spark within. Boom!